In your mind's library, where you've randomly stacked stories.
There are also 2 never-ending rows of shelves with stories that are your own.
My eldest auntie says that before shoes became fashionistas' collections, they meant privilege. She didn't have them, went to school without them, and got teased about it sometimes. In her school, instead of tables and benches, they had long sukus laid out on the floor in multiple rows. They had to kneel over, come on all fours to copy A, B, C's on their notebooks. The naughty boys behind her would sometimes giggle and poke at her bare behind from under the skirts she'd overgrown. Underwears meant privilege, and she didn't have them, not all the time.
The story of my mother has mostly been about dearth. She tells me she grew up with a lot of absences. First, her father, and then everything else that followed after. She tells me she always had to work so hard, finishing up her duties in the kitchen and then shifting to the jasa where she sat paliti kasera, bent over a stool with a spread of silver. Sharp tools, skills sharpened over time on the edge of compulsion, making things, never for her own self to adorn, but making things happen, making lunch and dinner out of whatever was in the kitchen, even when there wasn't anything much.
The only thing my grandmother, learned how to read as a child was poverty and hunger. She says on days there was no food in the house, her mother, my great-grandmother, played a game with the children. She asked my mom and her 5 hungry siblings to stay put and not come up to the kitchen because anyone who did was out of the game and would not be served any dinner. So they waited downstairs, ganny children that they were, listening to their mother serving dinner, clanging empty ladles on empty plates, sometimes for as long as an hour. She says they fell asleep like that, to the sound of plates and ladles, a sweet lullaby full of promises of full plates and full stomachs.
My mother tells me back in the days, eating an egg was a festive affair, once a year during Ma Puja, and that too if her grandmother was feeling generous. Buying new clothes was a tough bargain, first with the mother who was stingy, not by choice, and then with the shopkeeper who quoted a price my mother could not afford. Even today, my mother eats every last strand of meat left on the bones, chews an apple to its slimmest core. Dearth has been an efficient teacher.
My ba once told me that when he was only 8 and already working for someone else, he was out resting on a grassy field one day, tired from his day's work, when he found a book and curiously began flipping through its pages. But the Sahu came over and rebuked him so hard, he had to study or work. He says he remembers being so embarrassed that day he didn't dare to touch a book for years. Years later, I stand here with privileges my family's never had. Privilege, like my ba used to say, is being able to recognize letters and put them together, to read, learn, and explore about anything your heart desired.
Privilege is coming home with complaints to mom about how Bada's pencil stubs, sharpened to the last nibble of lead, always wrote so bluntly.
Privilege is learning that sharing is caring.
Dearth is knowing that that is the only way.
Privilege is this foreign, fluent tongue.
Dearth is a mother tongue we never had to learn. Privilege is an inheritance passed down to us as stories.
Dearth is having lived like these stories never happened.
Privilege is getting to let the world know that they did, that our stories matter, that we exist. Thank you.